Hello, good evening, everyone. Namaste and good evening from Tokyo. It's a pleasure to be assigned a moderator's role for this webinar on bridging the learning gaps caused due to pandemic. My sincere thanks to Ashish Bansal, Director, Yardstick Educational Initiatives, for inviting me to the webinar. To give you a brief about myself, I'm a passionate educator for past 2 decades. I represent Global Indian International School, a school which has global footprints in 10 countries across the globe. It's known for educational excellence and is recently declared as the world's most awarded network of schools by UK-based World Book of Records on August 1, 2021. I moved to Tokyo in 2020 January. It was a time when the pandemic was recognized or COVID-19 had just been detected in Japan. Having a first-hand experience of a new country, a new environment, and a new culture, and the new challenge it brought with it, I can say it with confidence that this pandemic has changed the teaching and learning process forever. The pandemic and lockdown measures pushed an experiential learning experience for all stakeholders of education, from management to staff to students and even parents. And more importantly, it highlighted the need for institutions and schools to have a robust forward planning measures, including the mix of both online and offline learning methodologies for a future proofing the education system of today. We all have gone through a swift technological transformation in education that has shown all educators the art of possible when it comes to using technology to enhance and improve the ways the teaching and learning process happens. What lessons can be taken from the pandemic as an opportunity to transform and reimagine the education of tomorrow? The planning needs to start today. The disruption to education systems during COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately affected the most vulnerable learners, bringing in inequalities with potentially dramatic and long-lasting implications. This requires an urgent address to take an action for learning gaps and ensure smooth and continued educational pathways for all learners. Over the longer term, systems will need to have strengthened learner resilience, fostering environments in which every individual has the competences required to reach their full potential. To that end, this webinar explores how educators can design and implement various policy efforts that can address the most urgent and important tasks concurrently, effectively implementing remedial measures while building students' resilience for tomorrow. Before we begin the webinar, which has a very wonderful panel of educators with us, let me ask the audience something very interesting. I hope the audience is ready to participate in an audience poll. Which of the following has been most affected area in learning? So I request the audience to choose. You have multiple options to choose. Which of the following has been most affected area in learning of children during pandemic? Is it the social skills, the emotional intelligence, reading and writing, problem solving, conceptual knowledge, creativity, collaboration, digital literacy, or communication? Let's see what you need to vote for and which one do you feel is the most affected. So audience, do participate in the voting. We can see some results coming on the screen. I see that the social skills reach up to 40%. Maximum people are voting for social skills. The next in line are emotional intelligence, reading and writing, and conceptual knowledge are almost reaching up to 8 to 10%. And problem solving seems to be least affected. I could also read it in a manner that problem solving has been most enhanced during the pandemic time. So, wonderful response from the audience. Are we able to display it to the audience?
Yes, ma'am. The results are displayed.
Okay, great. So, is anyone from the audience, would you want to comment on any of these? Let me ask Ms. Jyotsna Devi, would you want to talk about any of the learning gaps? Or anyone from audience can raise hand. Okay. Fine. Let me also take you to the next level of this webinar. We have a, okay, I have some message coming in. Anshu Saxena says, asynchronous mode of teaching has not been able to cover the learning gaps. Yes, many questions have started coming in, but before we take the question answer session, we would first hear out from our distinguished panelists as to what they have to share with us. Let me introduce you to the panelists. We have with us Nidhi Thapar, Vice President Academics from Ryan Education India, Ritesh Mishra, CEO, New Dreams Education Africa, Nandita Prakash, Education Advisor, Sri Ram Global Schools India, Mr. A. Sattar Mustafa Amri, Principal Al Rawabi Private School Bahrain, Suzanne Saraya, International Director, Explore Learning USA. May I first invite Ms. Nidhi Thapar, Vice President Academics, Ryan Education India, to share with you her expertise and answer some of the very relevant questions which the audience have given in pre-polling to all of us. Ms. Nidhi Thapar, please.
Thank you, Madhu. A very good evening to my co-panelists and, of course, all the educationists who have taken out time and are part of this webinar. As Ms. Madhu shared, I'm Nidhi Thapar, and I head academics at Ryan Education, a company that is into school management. I've been in this field of education for more than 2 decades now. And over these 2 decades, enough and more I've heard about teachers by choice or teachers by chance. Born teachers, they are born, they become teachers. So there's always a debate that goes on. But I have no qualms in saying that I am a teacher by chance, but having become one, I took to it as fish to water. And I realized that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And this probably, if I can even make that statement, this is my true calling. What drives me each day is the belief that I belong with my team and making a difference in the life of the learners under our care, each day, each moment that they are under our care. So that's my driving force. At Ryan Education, we have a student base of over 12,000 learners, and we manage schools across geographies in India. Our vision statement talks about nurturing future-ready global youth who are positively and responsibly going to impact the world. We live by this statement. Each program that we implement, each of our practice, we ensure that we are leading our learners towards that. Our core, of course, remains our learner-led, learner-centered, innovative pedagogy. And very proud of our teachers, our innovative learners, our inspiring educators who translate our dream into reality in the classrooms. While we do all of this, there is, of course, a lot of focus on the learning environment that is catered not for just the students under our care, but also the staff that works with us. Our strength is our robust processes, our practices, our programs that cater to the requirements of all kinds of learners and ensure a complete holistic experience for them. You can probably sense the pride in my words and in my expressions. And this sense of pride comes in every time when a parent comes to me, a student comes to me and says that what they are doing or the way they are learning or the way they learned during virtual schooling, they were the first ones among their friends to have done that. We provided experiences while people were still thinking of how to go about it. Very proudly, I can say we delivered them. And of course, the credit goes to our entire team who made it happen, the team of principals, the teachers, and of course, my colleagues at Ryan Education. Coming to the point of the discussion today. Now, over the last 2 years, obviously, there has been a paradigm shift in how learning happens. While on the other hand, we are dealing now with the gaps in learning. What I feel is before we even start looking into these gaps, there is something much more that requires our attention. And I think the poll which was conducted and the response we got, where 40% of the audience members say it was the social skills which were impacted the most. It reminded me actually of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, his ideas, for those of you, I'm sure most of you would know, that he talks about the basic needs being met first before the individual desires the secondary or the higher level needs. Hence, before we even try to address the cognitive needs of our learners, it's imperative that we look into their socio-emotional needs. Our students, whether 3-year-old or 13-year-old or 18-year-olds, have struggled for these last 2 years. They've been cooped up in their homes. They've been socially disconnected. And this is only, the tip that I'm talking about. I'm not even getting into the depths of other issues that would have cropped up. And obviously, this has had an effect on their mental well-being. So as a first step, it is important that we initiate steps towards these as we welcome our students back to schools. Speak to your children, discuss with them what's happening in their lives, what do they want to do. Have open forums, have something what we call the quality circle time, where the children are free to discuss and share without being judged. Create those forums for us. Be sensitive to the needs of your learners and be very, very observant. You are with the students the whole day. So be very observant about their behaviors. There will be some students who will reach out to you openly, but there'll be many to whom you will have to reach out. So make that extra effort. While you all do all of that, I think there was enough in the media about Azim Premji University's report on the loss of learning, and I'm sure you would have read it. It talks about 92% learners having a learning loss in language skills, 84% having in the mathematical skills, something as basic as identification of numbers or the mathematical operations. So obviously, these statistics are an eye-opener and further reiterate the need for plugging the learning gaps. While we plug the learning gaps, it's just not about doing it. We'll have to identify what the problem is. We'll need to allocate time for it. And then we will have to put a very structured plan to plug these gaps. I am aware that a lot of institutions start the academic session with a bridge program, a 15-day, 20-day rigorous revision of concepts, if I can call so. But trust me, try another approach, and I'm sure you'll be more successful. Beginning of the session, look at the linkages in the concepts, which are there in the subsequent grade. And then according to that, you need to plan your sessions. So to explain this, a little better, if I'm going to be doing number identification in, say, a particular grade, while addition goes on to the subsequent grade. So before you start with your addition, please go back, spend some time on number identification. So you will have to go a step back, a two-step back, depending upon the needs of your learners to be able to plug, even take a step towards plugging the gap. Diagnostic tests, of course, they do help. Now, the intent of these diagnostics tests will have to be outlined very clearly. The intent is very clearly that it is how we are going to plan our learning, and it is not about scoring students or the marks that they are going to get in these diagnostic tests. Please let your co-educators know that it is going to just help them plan their new learning. Another aspect, according to me, which needs to be looked into is the course content per se, or the curriculum. Trying to bridge a 2-year gap without even looking at the curriculum is not going to work. It's only going to lead to disaster, because the teachers, in spite of their best intent, will be struggling to finish the portion on one end while trying to plug these gaps that would have cropped up. They will consciously have to move away from content coverage and test scores and focus on learning. What will also be important is that we put to good use the learnings of these last 2 years of virtual schooling, be it the flipped classrooms, the digital learning, whatever has been tried, tested, and been successful. Look at ways how you can continue to use them as you move to complete physical schooling. Let the approach of one size fit all not be there. Differentiation has to be taken into mind. Differentiation, both in terms of identifying the needs and then addressing them, and subsequently even maybe assessing. This is the time to, look at the bigger picture. Look at what is it. Don't get limited by what I'm supposed to do in this academic session. Look at not as something, a course that needs to be completed, but a learning that has to be imbued by the children. So the last few things that I will say is act now. This is the time. This is the time you need to start planning. But while you plan, first and foremost, address the social emotional needs of your learners. That's of primary importance. Relook at the curriculum, work with your supervisors, work with your seniors, and see what can be done and what can be, postponed for later. While you're working with your children, bring in flexibility. Give them the flexibility. And of course, differentiating. Another important thing, ensure teaching for learning and not for testing. And last but not the least, do not forget to support your teachers and even enable them with skills, with strategies that will help them to first identify the needs of the learners, both in terms of socio-emotional and learning, and then work towards, filling or plugging these gaps, if I may say so. Thank you. Madhu, over to you.
Thank you, Nidhi. I love the phrase teacher by choice and teacher by chance, talking about, social skills, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and speak to children, create forums for communication, quality circles for that. You've given wonderful suggestions of bridge program, giving linkages in the concepts. These are wonderful strategies I believe are tried and tested. And suggesting for differentiation is a way forward. And support the teachers. I believe this is very, very important. Thank you so much. And let's take another question based on what Nidhi spoke. And may I ask to display another question, which is, about teachers. Can we have the poll question now? Are teachers more prepared and equipped than earlier? It's a very simple question on yes and no. So you have either to choose yes or a no. Although the question does implicate, if you ask me, it's a 50% answer. So let's see what the audience are talking about. Are they more prepared and equipped than earlier? Come on, audience. It's a very simple one. Oh, I think the poll is very interesting. It shows a lot of confidence in teachers. who have been the crusaders in this pandemic. And I'm sure our next speaker, Mr. Ritesh Mishra, CEO, New Dreams Education Africa, is definitely going to, talk up on this aspect about teachers, and also on the burning question on, how to identify the learning gaps among students and how to bridge those gaps. So over to Mr. Ritesh Mishra.
Thank you, Madhu, and thank you, Nidhi, for excellent presentation. I would think I would pick some golden words that Nidhi spoke. For me, the favorite was be observant. As teachers, we need to really start with that. How are the students' feelings? How are the teachers feeling? How are the parents feeling? How is the environment in the school? And if we start with that, I think we will go a long way. In this short time that we have, we are going to talk about, the teacher, the curriculum, the school, and the tools. The teacher, the curriculum, the school, and the tools. Now, before we do that, my name is Ritesh. I represent New Dreams Education. We run a network of schools in Africa, affordable, high-quality schools. And we have 6,000 learners in our network in the East Africa. The experience of pandemic in Africa has been very particular because we were already lagging behind in terms of the technical know-how, in terms of education technology reaching us, educational innovations reaching us, has taken time historically. So it has been an interesting experience in the pandemic, especially the longest closures that we faced in these parts of the world. So the most important thing, as administrators, I'm sure in the attendees, we have the administrators, and it's a very important task for them to talk about the teachers. What are the motivation levels of teachers? That is something which we need to build on. And definitely, one thing which we have observed, in our network is the positive attitude of the parents, which is now higher for the teacher than it was before, because now parents had become teachers and they realize that it is not easy to be a teacher, right? So I think that is something which is going to embolden our teachers to deliver better. And we need to tell them that you are the only people who have stood the test, the test of this pandemic. You have delivered, and we need to talk to them often about it as administrators. Secondly, the question about preparedness, and I was very excited to see that 85% of those who polled believe that the teachers are more prepared, which is the truth. Because you see, we had a lot of teachers, who would not really, very be keen about technology or be keen about adopting new innovations, but they realize that it is not an option anymore now, and you have to pick that. And therefore, in your own school, in your network of schools, in your ecosystem, you have to talk about how a teacher who can be a learner, a teacher who can pick tools, a teacher who can explore, a teacher who can innovate, is the teacher in this era and in this age. And that is what we need to talk to the teachers about, that they need to learn, relearn, and discover themselves as they come to classroom every day. Because the pandemic has brought many new challenges, be it social challenges, emotional needs of the children, emotional needs of the families themselves. They have been used to the mothers being at home, the female teachers being at home, the fathers being at home, and now they suddenly find themselves in the school. So I think there's a lot of discussion which needs to go around that, and that is something which is important for the administrators, the school managers, to talk about. People managers at schools need to really talk about, because if your teachers are not motivated and equipped, there is no way that you can bridge the learning gap. And that is where we need to really focus on. Second part, which I want to talk about, is the curriculum, the pedagogy. Again, picking from where Nidhi talked about, a connection between the learning linkages she talked about, and that's a very important point. In some of the countries in Africa, we are talking about condensed curriculum, where we exactly talk about the learning linkages between two set of concepts interlinked between two classes, so that it can be covered in short time. And that is something which each teacher probably needs to work on, so that the concept which was left in the previous class, the concept which is in the current class can be really taken together and can be taught in one go. Probably it is hard on the learner, but we have to be innovative enough to work on a condensed curriculum and deliver it at the same time. Another thing is about the flipped classroom. It was still a new concept. A lot of us did not believe in that, but we realized that with so much to cover, I'm sure your colleagues, your teachers in the network, they talk about how much syllabus they have to cover. Now, if you want to cover a lot of syllabus, that means you need to do a lot of work in terms of flipping the classroom. A lot of the content has to be provided to the learner to go and work at home, come back to school and discuss what they have not understood, discuss what they would like more clarification about. It increases the workload on the learners in one way, but it also ensures that a lot of concepts are covered very quickly. Flipping the classroom is very important at this point of time, so that learners can take some of the work, some of the load from the teachers, and do a bit of learning at home as well, and not go back to the pre-pandemic era where all the learning mostly happened in the classrooms. And again, how do you deliver the content is also important. In our network, we have been talking about hands-on learning. We have been talking about learning in the farm. We have been talking about learning near the pond. We have been talking about learning in the garden. So unless we make the learners really experience learning, they are not going to cram so much in such short time available, and their interest itself in learning would go down. Therefore, we have to ensure that learning is interesting. And this is only possible when we do a lot of hands-on learning, where learners experience the concepts what they have been learning in the classroom. Third important point is about the school itself. Is the school prepared? Is your school prepared to receive learners? Yes, we might think, okay, we have open windows, we have done ventilation, we have done, sanitation, we have sanitizers, we have, temperature guns, we have COVID certificates. But is that the preparedness we're talking about? Probably not. Is your staff prepared to receive learners? Are your teachers themselves mentally prepared to come back to school? And that is something which we really need to talk about. Much as we talk about safety of the learners in the school, safety of the staff in the school, we also need to talk about whether mentally and emotionally we are all ready. And I believe that we need to conduct lot of workshop. We need to conduct many workshops on that, on the social and emotional well-being, before we even start about talking about learning. And that is important, that once we prepare our teachers, once we prepare our learners, it would be better and faster in terms of covering the learning gaps. Again, what are the incentive for the learners? Why would they want to come out of the screen? They have been very good, cozy in front of the screen, right? They have been comfortable. They can switch off the camera and just go away, have some lunch and come back. Why would they want to leave that comfort and to be in school? Probably a lot of learners have missed school. They want to play, they want to go to the library, they want to go to the computer room, they want to, participate in debates, in clubs. But we need to have that add-on incentive for each learner to be in the classroom. What is that attracts the child to the school? And that is something which we need to have a proactive program in terms of building the incentive program for the learner. Of course, they have appreciated learning. They have appreciated schooling because they have missed their friends. But then to continue their interest, maybe in the first couple of weeks, they would be very excited to come to school, which we see that, children come on time and they want to be in school. But what happens after 3 weeks? Would they still want to come to school? Do we have enough motives for built in the system so that they still want to come to school? That is something, again, the school needs to really talk about and work on that. Then finally, about the tools. EdTech companies can do, wonderful job here. There are products which are off the shelf. There are products which are, readily available. but then probably we need probably some kind of innovation tweaking around, how we can cover the whole gap, and the tools that we have mastered in, whether it, a number of teachers in the whole world, maybe not everybody wanted to use Google Classroom. I mean, how many of us used really? I mean, in 2019, I mean, except say a few schools which wanted to use them, but now you see how useful this tool has been. It has made our life easy, right? So why don't we continue that? Why don't we use those tools? You look at the polls in Zoom webinar, right? It is so easy to flash a poll in a class and get to know live how much the child has learned, right? So these are simple tools which teachers have mastered, and I think we should keep that emphasis that we should not forget about these tools. This has helped us in the pandemic, during the pandemic, and it should continue in the classrooms. And also then educational edtech companies can come in very handy to really repackage the offering, repackage the curriculum, repackage the delivery of the curriculum. And I think schools should work on that customization and on that repackaging if we are to deliver and we have to bridge the learning gap. I think these are the points I wanted to talk about, and I thank everybody for listening in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ritesh. I really appreciate the way you've brought in various aspects of the learning gaps, providing wonderful solutions around it, and talking about the condensed curriculum. This is something everybody needs to look at. Concepts which are missed can be delivered through that, using flipped classrooms in helping them in covering syllabus, and hands-on learning, experiential learning is a way forward, and aspects of safety for learners, their social emotional needs, incentives for learners. Let me share the example with you. I mean, one example is that children would love to come to school because they don't want to miss their physical education class. They do not want to miss extracurricular activities which go on. Meeting friends, that's a big incentive. And wonderfully said that teachers do need to be learners for life. This pandemic has taught us that learning never stops. It has to go on for the learner and the teacher. And edtech companies, yes, they have come a big way, very creative and innovative tools they've come up with, which have supported learning, and there is no reverse to this. And that brings us to another question of the poll. On the poll, Ritesh, thank you so much. And this question is talking about, can edtech companies play significant role in helping schools? I know Ritesh has already answered that, but let's also hear from the audience. So audience, your opinion matters to us. How can we forget how, Microsoft Team, Google Classroom, polling, all this have helped? Oh, yes. I am wondering who are the ones who said no. That means we need to check with them that EdTech has not helped, but we will take that later in our question answer session. So now we have our next speaker, who is Ms. Nandita Prakash, Education Advisor, Sri Ram Global Schools India, who would be sharing with you again on the concept of why this pandemic has created the learning gap. What are the countering measures of to bridge the gaps between teaching and learning, how it has impacted the mental well-being of the students, and is it being able to counter the digital divide at schools? So over to Ms. Nandita Prakash.
Thank you, Madhu ma'am. Namaste and good evening from India. My name is Nandita Prakash. I am an education advisor to a few schools in northern part of India. Shri Ram group of schools in Ludhiana and Gurgaon are also a part of it. My job is to do the same thing, like observe the teaching learning processes happening in the schools. So even before pandemic and even now in the past 2 years, that has been my endeavor to connect with my principals and team of teachers and analyze every day through observation and to analyze what is the problem, where is the problem, and what are the solutions to it. I would like to thank Ashish for bringing people from different continents to share their point of view on the same topic, because I think it's very important. Once we all know what is happening in various schools across continents, we will be able to pinpoint the common pain areas all of us are facing. Right. So I've heard Ms. Thapar and Ritesh as well, and I'm looking forward to hear from Suzanne and Mr. Satar. And I'm looking forward for getting more ideas from everybody across the continent. I'm so glad that the participants today are from all these countries. So thank you, Ashish, for bringing us together. Madhuman, you are doing excellent in moderating all of us in this platform. And to the co-panelists, thank you for sharing the panel. So let me go ahead with sharing what my understanding says in this entire, over this entire topic. I would like to start with giving a brief about the problems according to my understanding. What are the problems? Because I think the half part is done if you identify the right set of problems. In our poll also, and most of us, we end up assuming what the problems are, but it is always important to study the surveys which are happening across various continents. And in India, in let's say US, UK. So there's one similar study, which was done by McKinsey very recently across various schools in UK and US. So let me share what is the crux of their study. They clearly say that apart from the various effects on the overall well-being of the child, the two major core academic areas which they are suffering are around mathematics and reading. Right. So what happens if these two areas are majorly affected and for prolonged time? So one is students who do not really learn the proficiency of language till third grade. The chances of learning to read and to learn further decreases by 70%, right? And the child will stay affected the rest of their life. The second, I would say the downside of not being able to understand the mathematical concepts during the middle years, concepts like fractions and the divisions. So the children are not able to cope up with mathematical concepts in their higher classes. Right. So you see, if this is the observation which has been made, which is there are data which is shared on public domain as well, which you can also study to see what is the actual effect, the tangible effect that is happening on our children on academic land. At the same time, there are other surveys as well, which also talks about the similar pattern which is observed in children's mental health. Right, so this is one. Second is, again, this data can be analyzed in every continent and every country, wherein it's clearly evident that the absenteeism has increased many folds, whether it is online or offline, whether it is hybrid. There's been a huge increase in absenteeism across all classes, across all age groups. Now, if your children are not present in your online classes or offline classes, every other effort that you're making, it's not going to be complete till they participate. Right, that's one. Second is, which is again adjacent to the same problem, there are higher cases of high school dropouts. Right, so if these children, of course, most of them belong to underprivileged sections, or in India, especially in government schools, but the rate of dropouts in high school is more than ever. Right, so when we are analyzing areas such as children's mental health and their social skill development, we should also be aware about these social issues which are also recurring simultaneously. Right, so I personally have divided this into two different parts of solution. So one is when children come back, Of course, we are looking at their academic performance, development in academic performance, but at the same time, we will also have to work on their broader well-being, the whole well-being. Right. So let me share you a few points about the academic performance, which is not different from what Ms. Thapar or Ritesh shared in their, in their examples. So number one, have a proper access of the learning gaps, the learning styles, and the level of understanding of children, so that you can bifurcate them into various groups and make their separate remedial plans. Now, EdTech companies provide you a lot of support in there, because when you're creating these remedial classes or remedial plans for different groups of children, these resources can be commonly shared. So you don't have to rework on the resource every time. All you have to do is sit with your supervisor or academic coordinator and analyze which resource should be utilized when. So it's about better planning. You can save your time still, right? So I think a lot of focus has to be done here. At the same time, when the teachers are doing their academic planning for the current session, as well as for the remedial planning, they have to be minutely observed and supported in every step, every week, every month, every day for that matter, right? Next is personalized learning intervention, which might also include some after-school support. So as schools, we all should be ready for that kind of a support, wherein we create a personalized learning intervention for every child. This will come only after you have done a proper assessment of the learning gaps and the learning styles of children. Then schools should also, institutions should also be open towards hiring more specialized employees, which are trained professionally to handle children with learning disorders, because they will have bigger learning gaps, right? So I think parallel to this, the entire remedial plan should be planned, keeping a special educator in the panel, or people who are specially trained to handle learning differences in children. Coming to the broad, to bringing the overall well-being of the child, I think it is very important that now we engage our student counselor more than we ever have. We probably have to hire new people in the project, because group or individual overall sessions for students is very, very important. And we cannot sideline it any longer. It has to be parallel to our other practices for academic performances, because this is equally important. Secondly, orientation for parents is very important, right? Because what you're doing, why you're doing, what is the need for these counseling sessions is very important. So I think your parents of these children also have to be oriented alongside. We also need to focus on student counseling related to being resilient, right? So special sessions can be conducted, one-to-one sessions can also be conducted. Capacity building program, and not to forget the other half, which is our teachers community. So capacity building program and stress management programs are very important for our teachers right now, because 2 years of teaching online, offline, hybrid has been very difficult for our teachers. So I think this is one community we should not neglect. Also, small efforts, that appreciating your teachers, aligning them and appreciating the small efforts that they are making to progress will go a really long way. And at the same time, I understand there have been different reasons for the industry has, especially education industry, has been affected because of various reasons. And at the number of places, in number of schools, the teachers are underappreciated, I would say. So I think small gestures such as dividing the workload among the staff members, giving the salary, disbursement of salary on time, or monetary appreciation is also necessary. So I think keeping all these things in mind, and in the broader picture, I think in every country, what we must need is a special fund from the government, which will be allocated immediately to do a similar survey, wherein you understand, nationwide survey, wherein you understand exactly what these problems are, where do they really lie, what is the age group of these children, and how can we create resources for this, so that these fundings can be reallocated to these various areas, and all the difficulties can be taken care at a greater level. So majorly the schools which are not as resourceful as other schools and government schools, they are the ones who are majorly suffering. And if you talk about the total number of students going to these schools, is definitely more than the ones which are going to resourceful schools. So I think that is one major problem area. Thank you, Madhu ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you, Nandita. You've very rightly brought to the forum about the various challenges which are, through the McKinsey's report, reading some aspects of it, affected mathematics and reading in early years. I mean, 70% is a huge number, that if they get affected, it's a great percentage. And especially if mathematics not if division is not learned in middle years, they don't learn mathematics. I imagine, as it is, children are very scared of mathematics. They have a scare. So these are very daunting statistics. And yes, absenteeism, which has increased, it shows disengagement. But yes, solutions also are there, as you are mentioning about personalized learning intervention, providing a special needs educator, parent orientation, student counseling. All these will definitely prepare the school to meet up with the measures to address the learning gaps. Thank you so much, Nandita, for sharing your beautiful insights with the audience. And before we move on to our next panelist, may we have the next poll, which is on, do children appreciate schooling more than they did earlier? Although Nandita has shared some statistics on absenteeism, but let's hear from the audience, what do they have to say on children attending school after the COVID? I'm not allowed to poll, but if you ask me, they do appreciate. Okay, let's see the poll results. Yes, they do appreciate. Children also appreciate coming out of the homes and going to school. So that's a good sign. Thank you so much once again, Nandita. And may I now invite Mr. A. Sattar Mustafa Amari, Principal Al Rababi Private School, Bahrain. So he brings with him a rich experience of the Middle East, and he will be sharing with all the audience about how the impact of pandemic has been on mental well-being of the students, how the learning gaps have been identified, and how in his school or in general, the bridge between the teaching and learning process can be brought smaller, and how it can be effectively addressed. Over to Mr. Sattar.
Good afternoon.
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I don't think I need to introduce myself more than I was introduced by our dear moderator today. My name is Abdul Sattar, and I'm a school principal, and I'd like to share some of my thoughts with you today. But before I start, I'd like to share something with you, maybe just to get out of this serious mood. Okay, it's about me. I'm nail fixed in my seat now. I know I'm a trainer, and I'm not used to being seated for a long time on a chair. I'd love to move on the stage from one table to another, talking to the participants and all these things. The second thing is that I'm totally physically disconnected from the participants. I don't know whom I'm speaking to, except for my screen, and that's why I'm scared of screen dependency disorder, which is SDD. The other thing is that I'm pressured by the time I'm allowed to talk about such an important issue as bridging the gaps or the learning gaps caused by the pandemic in 12 minutes. All these things, I think, will put me under pressure, and I hope I can recall my stress management skills to continue with this humble contribution. Anyway, I want to share this with you just to recall how it feels like on the part of the students and teachers when we are having teaching and learning online. That's the thing. I really feel that now. To start with, I don't think that we can talk about this topic without reflecting back on what exactly happened in the early 2020. As you all know, in February, suddenly we are in the middle of a deadly pandemic, and everybody was just striving to survive. And I don't think that anyone was thinking of learning or doing any other thing except for staying alive. Then, once we started adapting ourselves to the new circumstances, we shut down schools and we switched on to online learning. But during that time, we were three things have been affected. Okay, I'd like you to concentrate with me with these three things. I know that the roadmap I'm choosing is a little bit sophisticated, and I hope that you stay tuned with me for the coming 10 minutes. Now, during this online learning, the first thing that we have to look at was the learning environment. How was it at that time? Normally, we need a social space for effective learning to take place. However, that social space has become totally virtual with no physical interaction, no social connection, no felt security. And I will capitalize more on what is meant by felt security on the part of the students. And we don't need to talk about the digital divide and the most privileged and the least privileged students. That's the first thing. So the first thing that was affected by the online teaching and learning was the learning environment itself. So we switched from physical classrooms to virtual learning spaces. The second thing was the teacher. And before we talk about the teacher, please don't forget that the teachers themselves were under the same stress as students. So we should not just look at the students. Now, most of the teachers, as much as I know, started this online process of teaching while they lack the adaptive skills. Maybe because they did not receive enough training or something like that. So anyway, they were not very well prepared, or let's say they were unprepared, even technically. Some teachers didn't know how to operate the platforms or I don't know, these sophisticated digital devices. So number one, learning environment. Number two is the pedagogical readiness of the students, of the teachers. Then we move on to the most important part in the teaching and learning process, which is the student. Now, on the part of the students, during the online teaching and learning, the students displayed or demonstrated that they really lack the learning skills needed to do some independent learning. And I remember that since 2014, we've been talking and recalling and reiterating, please work on the whole child education. Do not just focus on the academic content. Design learning that targets the development of the learning skills. We need to equip the students with the learning skills, mainly critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, and communication, so they can continue learning even if they are outside the classroom. And now, during the online teaching and learning, students have missed or they have suffered from this lack of learning skills, and maybe that's why the gap was big later on when they came back to school. We discovered that there is a very big gap now in learning. Now, at the emotional side, the students emotionally, they were not ready. You know, that they were working under anxiety, stress, fear. Some of them were suffering even from sorrow, having lost some members of their families, all these things. And unfortunately, again, the students didn't have the necessary life skills, namely the emotional regulation skills, to manage those newly emerging emotions. Right. Having all this said, in such a learning environment, what was the, how did the students look like? Of course, now, number one, we had a remarkable drop in students' performance. Now we can see that students have negative attitude to learning, and just because during the online, I'm not generalizing, but most of the students during the online teaching and learning, they had lower cognitive engagement in online lessons, uh, and the thing that was really missing at that time, because I was observing some of the lessons, is the student-student interaction. Of course, the ultimate result was a loss in learning, or what we call a learning gap. So this drop in the students' academic performance cannot be attributed only to the deficiencies of online teaching and learning, but also more importantly, to the students' state of emotion during the pandemic. As I mentioned earlier, such as loneliness, sorrow, fear, and all these things, and anxiety. So with little relief, students came back to school with that fear, but that fear is coupled with three major characteristics or traits. The first one is inconfidence. Students are inconfident. Number two, they are demotivated. And number three, they are disengaged. And the ultimate result is a student who is more or less socially disengaged, emotionally dysregulated, and academically struggling. And this is what I call, or what we call, the COVID-19 new normal. That's the new normal. That's the reality that we have to deal with right now. A socially disengaged student, an emotionally dysregulated student, an academically struggling student. And that's why I don't think that this is an easy thing to do. And by the end of this presentation, I'll tell you what I call the process of bridging the gap, or the learning gap caused by the pandemic. Well, this is the situation now. And the number of students affected by the pandemic is more than 1,380 million. It's about 1.5 billion. And as I told you, don't forget the teachers also. The big number of students affected by the pandemic puts a lot of pressure and urgency on us to act systematically, but more importantly, promptly and very quickly, before these habits develop into a culture that I think we need Mr. Michael Fullen's lifetime research to change this culture. Because it's by chance. Yesterday, I was told that a teacher received a student in the class, and she was the only student who attended the class. And to my surprise, the teacher told the student, I'm afraid that what is being described now as a habit will develop into a culture. That's why we need to act quickly. Now, among other questions, we need to think, what exactly do we need to focus more in order to bridge the learning gap? What exactly we need to touch? And maybe we need to think of how can we build a more resilient system that can withstand future crises. Now, we need to focus more on three major dimensions when we talk about how we need, or what needs to be done to address the learning gaps. Number one, we need to have a new approach to the learning environment. Number one. Number two, the students' learning experience. And number three, assessment. Now, for the learning environment, I call this a process of restoration of sociality. And I was happy with the first poll that we had today, and that showed that 40% of the participants believe that the most affected thing in the students was their social skills. And that's true. And this gives evidence to my proposal that we need to restore the sociality. This is a visceral need in the human being, sociality, being together. How do we restore sociality? It's by creating what we call in pedagogy the social classroom. A social classroom has to be, I cannot go into this, but these are the major characteristics of a social classroom, and you can do your own reading later on. It's easy to create. In a social classroom, we have a sense of belonging on the part of the students using the pedagogical caring, or we call it the pedagogy of empathy, where the students feel that they belong to the classroom. The second thing, or the second characteristic of a social classroom is the community building, the humor, the tension-free, relation-based classroom management philosophy that has to be adopted by the teacher himself. So number one, sense of belonging. Number two is the community building classroom. Then we have number three, or the third characteristic is modeling. And I would invite all teachers to be effective intellectual enthusiasts. I mean, just display that enthusiasm to students, because students will. I mean, you are a model that students will just imitate you. The fourth characteristic of a social classroom will be what we call in pedagogy the social presence. The social presence means not only being in a place or being present in a place. Social presence means that being in connection with the others. Socially, I am present now here, but no, physically I'm present here, but socially I'm not present because I cannot connect with you, except that you can hear me. Anyway, it's limited social presence. And the fifth and the last characteristic of a social classroom is what we call the felt safety. It's not safety, it's felt safety. I mean, a safety that has to be felt by the students. Now, safety as opposed to fear. Students normally, they feel afraid when you present them with a new material, right? I mean, if during a lesson or a new lesson, students will be afraid of new things. But what needs to be done now to mitigate this fear? Just build on the students' prior knowledge. It means that the students need to feel that what we are presenting them with is only an addition to what they already know. So this is one way of what we call scaffolding, building on the prior knowledge of the students to mitigate this fear. And the second thing that might be a cause for the students' fear is assessment. And I'll talk later on about assessment. Of course, if the students know that the most important part in an assessment is the feedback they will receive from the teacher, then their fear will mitigate. This is the social classroom, which provides an engaging, authentic learning experience whereby students can build knowledge and therefore got empowered to understand, to store, to retain, and to retrieve that knowledge, because they are the ones who have constructed this knowledge. Now, as for the learning, now we are done with the social classroom. Now we're going to talk about the learning experience, second dimension that we need to address. Now, teachers here need to modify the learning activities, modify and accommodate the learning activities according to the students' cognitive and emotional readiness. This means that we need to design more authentic, collaborative. When I say authentic, I'm talking about the authenticity, the real world nature of learning activities, so as we can give sense to learning to students. Because we don't want the students to learn about something that they don't feel the need for it in their life. So we need to design authentic activities, collaborative activities that target the development of the students' learning skills. And I'm talking about here the 4 C's: communication, creative thinking, collaboration, and critical thinking, with analysis, interpretation, evaluation, all these things. So now it's no longer a luxury. It's no longer optional to develop the students' learning skills. And when I say the learning skills, just focus on the 4 C's: communication, critical thinking, creativity, and collaboration. The other thing that we need to focus, to modify our learning activities so as we target the development of the students' emotional regulation skills. and you just type emotional regulation skills, you will find that it's self-awareness, social awareness, social self-management, and relationship skills, and responsible decision taking. So to summarize this, when we design our learning for delivery, we need to think of, how to modify and accommodate the learning activities as the basis for the learning experience for the students, in a way that it targets the development, apart from the academic content, the development of the learning skills and of the social emotional regulation skills. The last dimension that we need to think of, having finished, we're done now with the social classroom or restoration of sociality. Then we talked about the learning design and delivery and the new approach to the students' learning experience. Now I'm going to talk about assessment. And in assessment, we need to assure that we achieve a shift from what is widely known in pedagogy, the high test and anxiety, to the low test and anxiety. Because when I say assessment, we say test, we say exam. This is what comes to my mind. We say quiz. All these are assessment tools. Now we need to reconsider or to have a new approach to these assessment tools. The first thing, I think that students after the COVID-19, and now they are in school again, they need more frequent assessments. More assessments. You'll tell me now you're going to put the students more under pressure? No, not at all. We're going to give them a lot of assessment, but specific assessment. Because, we cannot do any what we call retrieval practice without quizzes. However, bear in mind that these quizzes or these tests or whatever assignment, whatever you call any tool, okay, make sure that they are feedback oriented. The number one. It means that they are followed by feedback, and this feedback has to be given by the teacher promptly, quickly, on time, and that feedback has to be actionable. It means that it tells the student what needs to be done to refine and improve their work. So assessment, which is feedback oriented. Number two, or the second factor to have this assessment stress-free or anxiety-free, is that it's rubric based. We need to share the rubric with students. And I always repeat this. Rubric makes the students more focused. Rubric sends the message to the students that we have high expectations from you. As if I'm telling you, I know that you can perform this task and you can achieve the standards or the success criteria I'm sharing with you in this rubric. And number three, which is the most important thing, is that most of these assessments, at least in the beginning, make them low stake or zero stakes, okay? Maybe you'll tell me, okay, no stakes at all. I would prefer no stakes at all, okay? Because I don't want the students to be concerned with the score or with the mark, putting too much pressure on the students to get good score or good marks will make them what we call the strategic learners. Strategic learners. It's a very negative word, this one. Strategic learners means the students will learn the strategies of how to get good scores instead of learning academics and academic content, okay? And of course, by the way, this is what some teachers and most of the parents, what we call the counterproductive role of the parents, putting too much pressure on the students to get good marks. Now, with low stakes or zero stakes assessment, we are not concerned with marks. The objective is formative. It's anxiety-free at all. We don't have any mark. Now, if we do this to the students, providing them with feedback, then the students will have a chance to refine and review and improve their work. Again, they will receive feedback that they are making some progress. Then they will have that sense of achievement. Everybody would love to have that sense of achievement. Even when we are adult now, playing a simple game in our mobiles, I personally feel angry if I lose in a game. Anyway, that's the sense of achievement, okay? With that sense of achievement, we're going to have something very important. We will restore self-confidence. You remember that I told you that in the beginning that the students are coming back to school with a lot of inconfidence. Now, with the sense of achievement stemming from this specific learning design and delivery and assessment, plus providing the students with the social classroom, then we're going to have a self-confident student, engaged student, motivated student, and a student who is really invested in learning. To wrap up this humble contribution, I hope I've been so clear with you. Uh, uh, to wrap up this humble contribution to this very interesting webinar, uh, allow me please to conclude that bridging the learning gap caused by the pandemic is a character rehabilitation process. When I say character, I'm not talking about academic, I'm talking about the whole child, emotionally speaking and cognitive. The emotion and what is emotion, what is cognition. It's a character rehabilitation process that targets in an integrative way the student's emotional balance and cognitive satisfaction. When I say integrative, it means that no one should precede the other. I know it's difficult. It's difficult, and it needs a lot of support from the school management. And I think that even at the state level, countries or as a governments should think of a rehabilitation plan to implement because teachers need a lot of support. And these two things, I mean, achieving the emotional balance and the cognitive satisfaction of students, it needs a lot of effort because they have to go hand in hand. We cannot start with one and lose sight of the other. So if we work towards achieving the emotional balance of students and the cognitive satisfaction of students, then we're going to empower them to be more self-confident, engaged, and motivated, and most importantly, invested really in learning. Thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed my presentation. See you again, inshallah.
Wonderful, wonderful insights, Mr. Sattar Mustafa. And I really love this, the aspects and dimensions of social classroom, which you shared with the audience. Lots of questions which you have raised are debatable, especially, giving more assessments. And I'm sure audience would agree with me, and we would love to discuss this with you post the session, how to go about it. And focusing on building a resilient system and character rehabilitation process wherein both the community, the government, and the school comes together to bridge the gap is really, really the need of the hour. Thank you so much for sharing these insights with us. And we have our last panelist, Ms. Suzanne Saraya, who's an international director for Explore Learning, and she's from USA. And she is a very passionate educator in the short time I had in an interaction with her. So I invite her to share her experience on bridging the learning gaps with the audience. Over to you, Suzanne.
Thank you so much, everyone, for this opportunity to connect with so many educators. Thank you for Yardstick for organizing this event and for this distinguished panel. I think we've all learned so much from you today. I want to start by saying good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are in the world. It is early morning here in the US. My name is Suzanne Sarai. I'm the International Director for Explore Learning. For those of you who don't know what Explore Learning is a math and science e-learning company that was really built by educators for educators. Our programs are all focused on math and science, and they encourage you really to embrace your inner scientists and mathematicians and develop deeper learning at foundational STEM concepts. And of course, developing of the 21st century skills that Mr. Sattar just talked about: communication, creativity, critical thinking. And of course, when you're thinking about all of these, you have to think of how you can apply them through in the classrooms. As you may already know, some of our programs, Gizmos, Reflex, Frax, and Science for Us, they're all research proven. Nothing that we bring into the classroom has not been thoroughly researched. And when we're talking about COVID, it's good to kind of look back just for the last couple of years and kind of think of where we were. I mean, at one point last year, as others have mentioned, we had 1.6 billion students across 190 countries that were out of the classroom suddenly and overnight. And the COVID really is not over yet. As of January, we still had 635 million students that are really affected by either full or partial closures, going back to the classroom, going back out. So what we've noticed over the last couple of years is worth mentioning. First, the pandemic has put a spotlight on the critical nature of schools and education, and the great and important value of teachers, and really the necessity to safeguard educational systems for the future. It has also provided opportunities for schools to recalibrate and rethink whatever strategies they have in place. We know that some of the gaps that we're dealing with today were pre-existing. And so this opportunity that COVID has given us now is to adopt innovative solutions such as what my fellow panelists has mentioned, and really improve the curricula in your schools. And we know that over the past few years, students and teachers, of course, parents as well, have become more comfortable with technology. That was an issue before as we were pushing towards a more digital solutions in the classroom. Now parents are a little bit more comfortable, students and teachers much more comfortable. Teachers in particular have developed digital skills that are absolutely amazing. They've enhanced them, they've learned, they become themselves lifelong learners in the process. And that allowed them to be much more efficient in the classroom. We also see a lot better collaboration between educators and teachers starting to help each other so we could learn from each other and support our students in our classrooms. And we also see something that's really great that came out of this pandemic is a much better communication with parents. It was necessary. Our parents were our lifeline, and we really needed them to be there for our students as our, if you want, middle of the way coach. The other thing that we did notice is that we had to change the type of instructional materials we were using. The material now had to be much more flexible, differentiated, inclusive, and more engaging. And it had to support growth mindset and that bring in varied approaches to learning. Because of course, if you have material that doesn't give teachers effective digital tools in the classrooms, how are you going to empower them? So you really need to look at material that was purposefully designed to improve instruction and empower teachers so they can better focus their time and resources. And we know that resources are always limited in the classroom and in schools, as much as whether you're in a very small school or very large school, whether you're a top tier school or not, you always have a limit on your time and a limit on the resources that you have. So we needed to think about what are the best methods to use, what are the new discourses we can bring into the classroom to support attainment, but also progress. And of course, well-being, student well-being has become a major topic. As you have noticed today, it's been a very important topic. Now, we all agree that it's not enough to just simply reopen the doors after COVID-19 is over. We really needed to have a much more tailored and sustained support so teachers and students, of course, can catch up and readjust. I think there's a big readjustment that has to happen after all of these months of challenge. And I think a lot of challenges are still ahead of us. And as my fellow panelists have said, the time to act is now, because the future of an entire generation is at stake. So we find ourselves right now in a very tenuous balance between supporting students while pushing their learning recovery, right? How far can we push? Should we bring in more rigorous programs? Should we start thinking about more assessment, like Mr. Sattar had said earlier? Should we focus more on their students' well-being and only that in the beginning? It's really big questions that we have. I think, in my opinion, we need to start by identifying where the gaps are specifically and figuring out whether those gaps were pre-existing or new. Is this some new problem that we're seeing, or is this something that we're seeing before? Prior to the pandemic, student well-being was an issue already. It was something that we talked about quite a bit. we were talking about how we can bring in better solutions in the classroom. Think about how classrooms have or not changed at all in the past 300 years versus, for example, planes or automobiles or your phone. Think about what the phone looked like, you know, in the beginning of its creation to now. How big of a leap did we have in that development? Yet when you think about the classroom, it really has not changed. We still have students sitting at their desk listening to the teacher. And I think this pandemic has brought in the idea of, again, that shift from moving from a culture of teaching to really a culture of learning. So what solutions can we bring in? You know what the best, most proven solution is? One-on-one tutoring for each child. And that's impossible. We know we can't do that. So we need to think about what we have learned from this idea of this research that says that if we can spend one-on-one time with a student, we can really make a difference. And so then we go back and think, well, what can we do in terms of using the technology that we have and possible around us to really support our students? And when we think about the first area to focus on, it's really supporting the basic skills of our students and engaging them. We have to bring back the joy of learning. And to do so, you need to integrate STEM in the classroom. And you need to integrate learning games so you can allow students to develop not just content, but skills. Develop their critical thinking skills and their ability to process challenging information. So when we cannot do one-on-one tutoring, the next best thing is to start thinking to how to work with small groups. And those small groups can be in different manners. They can be groups based on ability, which is what we see the most, but they could be also based on interest. Grouping students by their personal interest so that they can work on a particular topic, or grouping students with different abilities so that they can learn from their peers. We know that students learn very well from their peers. Of course, differentiation and personalization are very important topics, and those will really depend on each classroom. You have to figure out where your students are. That's why social emotional learning is so important, and programs that support social emotional learning, where they allow students to develop goals and help them get to those goals. Using STEM, as I said earlier, because that's where you're integrating various disciplines into a cohesive learning paradigm where you're going to be able to link it back to real world application. And that is something really important. Look at a problem around the world, bring in science, bringing technology, bringing engineering, solve problem, bringing math, instead of trying to teach them kind of in columns, separate silos, bring it all together. And that will necessitate not only teachers working together, but also students and the teachers communicating their ideas and deciding together what real world applications they want to look at. I think some of the colleagues here on this presentation said, bring your students outside, let them see the pond, let them see nature and bring it back in. Absolutely. STEM activities that are real. Nothing like we see often in these programs with problems where we have trains leaving various stations at different times. I think that does not anymore work with our students. Keep in mind that we need to have a continued blended program. The reason why blended and digital resources are so important in the classroom is that they will provide you with data. The biggest thing that came out of online learning is that we as educators have been able to go in and learn for each student where they're at. Is it content that is a problem? Do they not understand the concept? Or is it that they lack analysis skills? Is it that they can't interpret data? Is it that they cannot understand what's happening in the story? And I think those are important pieces that data can bring you through proper programs such as Explore Learning programs, which are really focused on exactly that, giving a chance to the students to test out their ideas in real applications, having no fear of failure because they can try again and again, bring in vocabulary and connecting to wherever their language, original language may be. We know that that's an issue with English language learners, French language learners, Spanish language learners, whatever their original language might be, having that connection to their own world and having science and math classes that integrate social emotional learning is really important. And promoting culturally responsive and sustaining education in those, whether they're remote, online, blended, or hybrid environment. We also know that we need to have programs that are going to support formative, summative, and diagnostic assessment. So assessment is just not one thing or the other. We need to use all different types of assessment so that when you're teaching, for example, a particular lesson on a particular topic, you can have this quick formative assessment that tells you what's happening in this lesson, who's understanding this concept, who's not, how do I divide up my group? How do I go back and work with my students specifically so I can support them in their own needs? Of course, flipped classroom, like we talked about earlier, is a very big part of it. And all of this formative, summative, and diagnostic assessment is going to give you that data that's going to inform your decision making, and is going to be something that's in whatever you learn. I think in your classes from your students, it's very important that you share that with your peers, whether it's within your school, within other schools. That communication between schools becomes really important to bridge those gaps, because others may have found solutions or may have tried certain applications that others that you may want to learn about very quickly. And I think that's why webinars like today are so important. Game-based learning is also really, really essential. Game-based learning has been proven in many ways to bring in students and engage them at the level where it allows them to have a growth mindset, because they don't feel threatened. They don't feel like they're being quizzed. They really feel like they're just playing, and by playing, they're learning. Project-based learning and CBL, challenge-based learning, are also two other aspects that I highly recommend you try in your classrooms. Because again, it fosters this collaboration between students, this communication between students, problem solving, critical thinking as well. And of course, it's creative thoughts that you can bring in by having students solve problems that are real problems. And what we also see very importantly is that today, teachers are prepared to try quite a bit. They're prepared to really test out new solutions, give them the space to do so. And I think what we need to keep in mind while we're doing that is we need to make sure that our instructional strategies are curated to align with students' interests and needs. That means we need to take into consideration and meet students where they are in their cognitive learning levels. And keep in mind that our younger students, our elementary year students, are still at surface learning. And surface learning is when they, through precise approaches, students are going to explore this concept and develop skills that are going to give way to deeper exploration, right, of concepts. So think of models like the 5E models when you're approaching it, where you're first engaging the students, exploring concept, then you're engaging your students on that with an explanation. Then after that, you can elaborate with different activities and finally bring in an assessment at the end and an evaluation. Remember, we're still after surface learning, we move into deep learning, and from deep learning, we move to transfer learning. And in deep learning, students are going to engage with data and evidence, and they're going to uncover and articulate generalization about what they're learning. And then transfer learning is when they're going to take their prior knowledge and apply it to different principles or new innovate or new novel contexts that may have never seen before. So we have to take into consideration all of that. And we have to transition from where students are today to where we need them to be with a very clear process. So using, as I said, solutions like flipped classroom, making sure that they're supported, but with hands-on and experiential learning, and really giving them a rich virtual inquiry-based environment in the classroom, developing on STEM, making sure that your classes are inclusive and differentiated, promoting a growth mindset to support student well-being. We know studies have shown that if students are adopting a growth mindset, automatically it'll affect their academic success. And make sure that you're also focusing again on the basic. Math fact fluency is a basic, reading fluency is a basic. And don't forget to include robust professional development for your teachers. And all of this is something that we can work with you on supporting you in terms of math and science, and integrating these solutions into your classroom, because they're focused on exactly that, supporting you whether you had pre-existing gap, new gaps, or you're trying to reach the students as a whole. I hope I've not taken too much time. I know we're past the time, and I want to thank you all for your attention, and I hope I've answered a few of your questions through my presentation.
Thank you, Suzanne. I'm sure you have addressed a lot of questions which came before the the session began. The audience had given a pre-session questions, and I could see from your presentation that you have addressed most of them, especially giving them the strategies of 5E, that is engagement, exploration, explanation, elaborate, and evaluation. A lot of focus on growth mindset. I think that encompasses everything. Having a growth mindset is definitely bringing in empowerment, bringing in collaboration, and bringing in everything which needs to be help us identify and bridge the learning gap. PD for teachers, I believe all panelists have laid stress upon this, and this is definitely preparing teachers for being learners for life. And this is very well said. Thank you so much. And I see that the audience have also posted some questions. So can I now keep the floor open to all the panelists so that they could take up some questions which are put in the Q&A session. Let me read the first one to, I think, Miss Nidhi. This is from Mr. Arun Kumare, and he asks, due to pandemic, most of the students have already literally forgotten everything they learned in school. In order to increase their technical and practical skills, what measures do we need to take as a parent? So over to you, Ms. Nidhi.
Yeah, thanks, Madhu. Thanks for the question. I think it starts with something very, very basic, which some of the co-panelists has talked about, which is joy for learning. We will need to take conscious steps towards reigniting this joy for learning and not make it a mechanical exercise. The way children have easily slipped into complacency, disinterest, trust me, once you bring in this joy for learning through your strategies of engaging them during these sessions, there is going to be an obvious and evident difference that you're going to see. So that's what I would, suggest to Mr. Arun, and of course the participants who are still there with us.
Thanks, Nidhi. I believe joy for learning and joy for teaching both can be incorporated. So parents do support the teachers, and of course, make learning as a joy. Thank you so much. We've already exceeded time, so we'll take one more question, and that is from an anonymous attendee. How can we make our coming session more interesting, fun-loving, and knowledgeable for various classes? Because now suddenly things will turn from online to offline to them. Some are still mentally 2 years back. So may I request Nandita to answer this?
Thank you, Madhu ma'am. I think it will be the children have not they're not mentally 2 years back, because they have been learning online, offline, and in fact, beyond our online classrooms, children have been doing a lot of self-study through various resources. So let's not underestimate, the level of knowledge that they have gained otherwise and other than what we have given them. However, making the classrooms more interesting, I would say that creating an anticipation. This exercise we also tell to the teachers when we used to have regular classrooms, that always think about a point of anticipation that you create before you introduce a concept in the classroom, right? It should be unrelated, yet it can be, a relation can be established. So talking about a point of anticipation with children makes them interested in the topic even more. Always start the classroom like, with the pre-primary children, we take up circle time when we talk about how their day was, what are the things which are bothering them. So why not do the same thing with our middle school or high secondary children as well? Start the day with a brief chat about how they have been, because you see, they have been emotionally distant from each other, socially alienated, I would say, and bringing them together will kind of, you're switching them back to the regular classroom way of learning and teaching. All right. So I think we must begin our day with those two activities. It would not kill much of your time, but it will definitely bring their interest back into the classroom. So whatever they have been missing missing social interaction. Pressure point those areas. So I think that will bring, some energy in your classroom. You also have to connect back to them emotionally. So as Mr. Satar said that, let's not forget about teachers. They have also undergone the same process of not being present with their children. So for you also, it will be a very good exercise to come closer to your children, to the group that you're dealing with. So I think, and brain breaks are very important. See, children, their attention span has reduced, right? So inducing brain break activities in between is very important. Do not stretch upon a particular topic for long. Think of innovative ways of introduction. That's where the EdTech programs help. So that's why instead of stretching the lectures, bring in the audio-visual aids in between, bring in some activities, make it more experiential, as Ritesh said. So I think a combination of all this will bring their attention back to the classroom, and our classrooms will be as cheerful as they were, even more cheerful than before.
Well said, Nandita. Thank you so much. There was one question which came before this webinar began, and that's again about, students are leaving school and joining other, or sitting at home, not attending classes, etc., etc. But due to this, student enrollment is getting lower. How to cope with it, and how to increase student enrollment in this pandemic situation? I believe Mr. Ritesh, would you like to take this question and answer it?
Definitely, I think that's a grappling question which all of us are struggling with. In all schools, we see that there's a dropout of children. Definitely, the most the key thing that we need to do is that work on the parental confidence. A lot of parents are still hesitating to send children because of course, the health reasons. So I think a lot of awareness campaign has to be done on how school premises are safe and how we are taking everything very seriously. Unless we do that, I think it would be very challenging for us to get the children back. Number two, we have not been talking to children about the pandemic. I think we need to spend a lot of time talking to them that what it was and what went wrong, and why as adults we failed to provide safety to them, what our generations they could not deliver, and how they need to make it better for the people who come after them. So I think we need to do a lot of talking to our children so that it spreads to their fellow classmates who are still not in school, that it is okay to experience something like that once in a lifetime. It happens. So I think there's a lot of counseling that we need to do with children who are already in the school, so that they can become our ambassadors. And that is something which we really has to be taken up. And of course, somebody called about the new normal. I think we need to really define it for everybody, what it really means. You just saw that somebody came to my chamber just now and wanted to meet me urgently. So I had to put on my mask and, and be ready for the person, so it is just that, we have to teach our children, our ecosystem, that it is going to be around and we have to learn to live with it. And the more we talk about it, I think closer we come to the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ritesh. And I think this brings us to, addressing all the questions which the panelists, which the audience have asked and the panelists have answered. I think some of them, Mr. Sattar has also typed in the answer for one question. So just to sum it up, yes, certain key initiatives which need to be taken to address learning gaps are bringing a personalized learning interventions. A personalized approach is very, very important in this era now. And these intervention approaches will or should include, developing individualized development plans, learning plans, providing one-on-one or very small group coaching for older students, providing flexible learning options, pathways, and transitions for them. Additionally, or specialized instructions for certain students, as special needs students were, were being talked about, and additional resources based on student needs like edtech tools. And if there are inequalities, then more resources need to be added. So a wonderful and a very, very enriching discussion which we had from the panelists. So I take this opportunity to thank all the panelists, Ms. Nidhi Thapar, Mr. Ritesh Mishra, Ms. Nandita Prakash, Mr. Sattar, and Suzanne. It was wonderful interacting with all of you, and I'm sure the audience did listen to a beautiful interaction amongst all of us. And thank you, Mr. Ashish, for arranging all this webinar to all of us. Thank you all, and have a lovely, lovely evening ahead.